Greetings, sir and sirettes, and welcome back to From the Depths with me, Lathrix, and of course, welcome to the sandbox mode, in which we are finally going to be building a replacement for our little drone, which just caused the frame rate to drop to 10. Okay, drone, I know you're sad about going away, but please give me my frames back. Nope, you're making it worse. I need to restart this. Turns out Lathrix hadn't deleted video files for the last 2 weeks, and 2 terabytes of memory were completely full of just recording footage. So, like I was about to say, we're going to be replacing the drone. Now, what I want to build is honestly just a small helicopter, either using simple weapons like the autocannons, which people really want me to see use, which I definitely will even if not today, or another small advanced cannon similar to the drones. It wouldn't be difficult to put something like that inside of a helicopter, and unlike the drone, maybe not even have it exposed. But worst comes to the worst, we could always use missiles, which honestly we don't have all that much of currently in the campaign outside of the skimmers, and the skimmers need to be updated as well, so maybe that might be the best course of action. But definitely, we need to use Dedicated Hellerblade spinners. My lord, I cannot talk today. How's recording going, Lathrix? Oh, recording's going fine. The holidays are just around the corner. I'm having to go home 2 days earlier than expected because of family members and illness, and everything's fine. But it's okay, because when I actually start recording, I forget how to use basic words. Yeah. Once again, if anyone ever thinks they cannot achieve their dream, just bear in mind that Lathrix speaks for a living. You're gonna be just fine, trust me. Now, how are we going to do this? So, what I think we're going to do is we're just going to have one main blade which will control the pitch, and then use a PID system to control pretty much everything else. Also, that looks awful. Now, for those who don't know, when you're using a dedicated Hellerblade spinner, yay, you don't actually have to have these facing the correct way. They can be completely messed up like this. It'll look awful, but it will work in the exact same way. The only thing affecting if this goes up and down is simply continuous or continuous reverse, and then the way this is facing. And that's pretty much it. Now, the real question is, am I going to use the blade with... There we are. Am I going to use the blade with always up or not? Always up is great if you have one centralized blade, which we will, but it can cause a few weirdnesses as the vehicle takes damage. I think it all depends on how much health we're going to put into this helicopter. How big is it actually going to be? I'm thinking at most 500 to 1,000 volume. That's the absolute limit. There we go. That looks weird. Why aren't you... Is it because I did it like this? Nope, you're just really weird. Okay, good, fine. Everything's normal. Everything's normal. Now, how high do we want these to fly? If we use them as swarmers, we will be altering this for each and every one, but as a base height, similar to the drone, probably about 100. We don't really want it to go much higher than that, because regardless of the weapon it uses, it just makes it more difficult for the weapon to be useful against ground targets, which will most likely be the main enemies we face. This bit really depends on how heavy we make the craft, so don't really care too much about this just now, and that should go up into the... Well, it should spin horribly because... Ta-da! That was none. Okay, still going to spin horribly, but... Oh, lord, that's making me feel ill. Let's just, look at the drone being relatively normal in comparison to, the beginnings of the helicopter. Either way, it's working. We just need to make it more stable. I think that if we go down the route of having quite a small craft, missiles may be the way forwards. Now, missiles are not that strong in comparison to a lot of the other weapons in this campaign, but it is still nice to have some variety, which is really weird for me to say, because normally I use missiles too much. This time around, I don't really have one craft which is using missiles, which I want to keep permanently. Although I am also tempted to make a missile variant of the tank very, very soon, which will definitely take the role of the helicopter a little bit. Although the whole point of having something in the air means it's a lot harder to hit, it's a lot faster in general, and, well, it's just nice to have something in the air, honestly. Not that happy with how this is turning out so far. Now, for turning, I really want to use a blade. I just think it'll look way better and a lot more natural. Going forwards, we have a bit of a choice. We could hide a very small blade on the inside, which will cause it to go forwards, but that would be difficult and certainly consuming a lot of the limited space we have for the AI and the ammo. Or we could just have a couple of jets. We are definitely going to have a couple of wing attachments just for the weapons, so that's a logical place where the jets can go, and that would be cheaper and easier, but I don't know. I don't know. So a bit of a change of plan. I've decided to actually add the blades last, because right now we are running into the problem of the center of mass is being changed constantly, and I want that blade, especially if we're using always up, to be right in the middle of the center of mass. If it's off, it means we're going to have to dedicate more engine power, which is going to be very limited on just stabilizing, which really isn't something I particularly want. Now, as for size, I think this is looking at least correct. I want it to go a little bit further back, obviously, for the tail, but I think this will be okay. I might even be able to add a very small advanced cannon on the bottom, which is stationary and can only fire forwards. Not that fantastic, but if we give this a true aerial AI, we could make it do attack runs, and then during the attack runs it uses its missiles, making sure to only allow the missiles to fire when the enemy is in front of it. That way, it's not going to randomly waste missiles throwing them all over the place. Maybe. I've also took a look at the Steel Strider's helicopter, the Shadowcat, and honestly, I do like how they've done their advanced cannon in a very similar way, but I'm not as keen on a few other elements of the craft, and I'm not going to look at any other helicopters now, because otherwise I'll be influenced and then I'll just end up copying something. You know what would look really cool? If we had the two wing segments on spin blocks. That way they wouldn't have to be completely horizontal, but instead could be at angles. Now the problem with this is it means the entire wing is routed to one block. If that block gets destroyed, the wing is gone. But considering we're still under 600 resource, I'm okay with that little bit of vulnerability. I'm also going to add some wooden armor to this, removing some of the metal to make it look a bit more scrapped together, so that price will go down. And I think I am going to have enough space that we may even be able to use a fuel engine. And I think that's going to be the big deciding factor on if we're going to use a small advanced cannon or not. I want the cannon, but things like fuel engines are larger than RTG, steam engines have the same problem. There's a lot of quality of life things I would rather have than the advanced cannon. If we can fit both, I'm having both, but there's a real good chance that's not going to happen. Aw, look at the tiny little missiles with their tiny little explosive heads. They're so tiny and cute and going to be utterly useless, but if we make them any bigger, they look really silly. Oh, I think this is a good size for them, so I will keep it as it is, but I may end up having to increase the size of these missiles in the future. That is really, really weak. So, on the upside, we don't need one turn. If we're going to use this with an aerial AI rather than a land AI, which I normally use, then the missiles are only going to be fired when we're looking at the target, so we don't need one turn. I've also used the launchers, what are they actually called? The ejectors, the missile ejectors, which means we don't need as much fuel either, because they simply won't be fired from that longer range. This will make them terrible versus a lot of different types of opponents, but I think that's fine. There we go. Now, do we want a short-range thruster or a variable? Now, variable is better in all ways except for one. The short-range thruster can very easily be delayed, which is honestly awesome looking, purely for looks, not for any real use. May use that, may not. Do we want them to be agile? Not really. We're almost using them as bombs, honestly, at this stage. So, do we want an extra warhead or an extra fin? I'm going to say extra warhead. So, let's make them double frag. And we still want that, though, to be an active radar. I'm actually tempted instead to use a laser seeker, whose name I can never remember for the life of me. There we are, the Laser Designator Receiver. That would look cool as well, because we could actually see where the different helicopters are aiming, which would be interesting. But the problem with this is that this means the helicopter will need a proper detection system. Regular missiles don't need that. This is also a problem with the advanced cannon. I'm going to need to actually have the helicopter aim rather than just fire the missiles, then the missiles do their own thing, which isn't fantastic. Now, you can share the detection between vehicles, but how about if I just want a swarm of helicopters? We can always add this later if we have a good flyer to go with the helicopters, like a main vehicle, but for now, I would rather just go with the active radar and just keep it like that. This is going to be a really non-agile, short-range missile, but at least double warhead, unlike the missiles from the drones, which were single warhead. At least I think they were. So they're either going to be the same strength or more, which is good, which is fine. I wonder how short-range these would actually be. Oh, can I fire this as we go down? With the extra speed at the start, you know, that's not too bad. Oh look, there's the Steel Strider vehicle. Hi, Steel Strider vehicle. Sorry, Steel Empire vehicle. Do you know what would look really awesome? If the wings only came down when an enemy is present, and that really wouldn't be all that difficult. Activate if enemy range is less than 5,000, and we simply spin the blocks. And yep, this wing is not finished yet, so please don't judge it. And then we'll have the opposite next to it, which will be, there we are, if there are no enemies present within 5,000, or there's just no enemies at all, spin blocks rotate back to 0. Now, of course, these will have to have a really limited effect range, so they don't affect the main blade, but let's see if that works. Enemy gets destroyed, wing goes back, connects to the vehicle, enemy spawned, it does the opposite, and yeah, that works out just fine. And this is why you should always make sure that your control blocks are not set to unlimited range. I mean, we could have it like this. I think it would scare a lot of opponents away. Well, ignoring the blades going a little bit, insane, the helicopter's actually coming along really well now. We have a very small engine mounted at the back, giving us 300 power, which should be enough, although I may upgrade it if we need a little bit more. And I'm quite happy with the shape. I did try to add an advanced cannon, and considering we have so much space being used up in the arms and everything else, and the control blocks to do certain things, there's just not enough space in this type of hull for both an advanced cannon of any real worth and the missiles and everything else. I think I'll have to make a separate version, a bit of a gun helicopter, which will accompany the missile version. But let's fix this. Is it you that's messing up? Yeah, it definitely is. There we go. And everything's back to normal. Okay, so I've just threw together a blade with some control blocks at the back, and I've now moved the rotor at the front so it's in the correct place. All I want to see is this capable of turning in its current state, and how stable is it before we add a PID system? Because honestly, if we can avoid using one, it's better, because it means we have more engine power for forward thrust and keeping the altitude, but also less cost overall, so it would just be good for everything. Letting go now. And let's see the altitude. Going down in a second. There we go. Going back up, but not particularly quickly. This means the blade is always going, even if it's going down, because I'm not turning the blade off. I'm simply slowing it down once it reaches the correct height. This way it sort of bounces between just above and just below the height it's trying to go for, so the blade is always on and always causing the craft to be corrected, at least in terms of pitch and roll, which seems to be working out okay. Now, as for turning, can you please turn around for me? Oh, that was perfect. Do it again. Do it again. Oh, it's like a little ballerina. Oh, that's lovely. You're lovely, you are, little helicopter. Yep, that is exactly what I wanted. The problem is I don't really want the back rotor blade in its current position because it just looks weird. Though we could make it look really scrappy at the back, almost like it was half broken, and we've sort of, well, used pipes to hold a rotor blade, which is currently the case, actually. Still, really happy with that. This is going to be a really smooth helicopter, even though we have no PID. And it's still fairly cheap. At less than 3,000 resource, it's only now approaching the cost of the drone. And all we need to do, really, is add forward thrust. We could technically use it as it is. That's actually really weird. We could, I mean, well, we also need some ammo as well. That's where some of the costs are going to come in, but we're not far off. Ooh, we could hide thrusters down here like this. That wouldn't be a terror. Okay, there's a chance right now, we're going to quickly save, there's a chance right now that this wing falls off. Don't! It didn't! Is that on the center of mass? Just about. Oh, not quite. Yeah, still probably going to need a PID. Do this for me. Yeah, that's never going to work out. Okay, back to balancing. On the upside, pitch is no longer a big problem. On the downside, well, I think we are pretty close now to a stable flight. This will never be truly stable, because we're not using the land AI, which definitely deals with stable hovercraft and such more, because this isn't a hovercraft, it's an actual copter. It's going to be a bit weird. The aerial AI really likes things being like planes. This isn't a plane, it's going to be a bit weird, but it works exactly as intended. And the turning speed is a little bit bizarre, honestly. Yep. That's how quick it is, like maybe half a second, 1 second for a full turn. But it's doing everything I wanted it to. It will go over the target, it will fire on the way, it will go past. Hopefully in this margin now it will have a small chance to reload. Probably not much, because I can't think of how much ammo I can actually put on such a small craft. Turn around again, and then fire the missiles which have reloaded. And all while staying very close to the target, so things with cram cannons may have difficulty even having a chance to aim, let alone hit the target. Now, if we had a bit more variance with height, which we can easily do by just shifting the motor drive to a much higher level, like this, there we go, bouncing around a bit more, then we would be harder to hit, but I also think we wouldn't look quite as good. First basic battle test, and begin! Okay, that's good. Not firing straight away, waiting to get into range with its weird swagger of a movement. There we go. That damage was actually okay. One missile bounced for some reason, but ignoring that. Second volley incoming, and once again a load of damage to the houses. You know what? I feel like that will be okay in the actual campaign. Now, it may look like it's going up, but, yep, it's still completely stable at the correct altitude. Going back down again, as it should do. It normally hits about 130 before going down, then it goes down to maybe 110? A little bit underneath that before once again starting to rise, so it has a 20-meter altitude gap right now. Of course, over time I will try and fix this. I think one of the main problems is I was ignoring drag to begin with. I always do this, I'm always guilty of this. The drag factor right now is way too high, which means it's pushing everything down. On top of this, adding the ammo to the back has slightly moved the center of mass. So I need to fix that as well, and that's probably because I changed these over to metal. So once I fix those two, bringing the drag down and altering it so the mass is properly in the middle again, I think we're practically done. Maybe a bit more speed, it still seems a little bit too slow. 3 of the new copters have found an Onyx watch all by itself, so naturally they assault it. Now the question is, will they ram into each other? Each of these has slightly different settings, which I think should mean they can't crash into each other. But it all depends on how fast the craft reacts. I have purposefully basically put them all on a collision path, except for I think this one, which should dodge naturally, but then when it comes back around, it should then crash. I just want to see if, in this very short space of time, will they move out of each other's way. They might not. Yep, you're all moving into different positions just about in time. Those two almost crashed, but in a second this one will be lower, this one will be higher. In fact, I would say now, none of them will crash. So if they're spawned in at a decent range, 100 meters away plus, they should be fine. So now they can work together as the best of friends. Though maybe those two should have a slightly wider gap. Those two have a 15-meter gap. These two have a 20-meter gap. And clearly 20 meters seems to be the golden spot there. Okay, all good. In fact, they're still moving into position. It looks like this one's falling from the sky slowly, but that's because I really set it quite low. And you're getting higher still, so actually it takes a little bit longer than I originally expected. Which is still fine, as long as they do move into that position. That was all I was really testing. Yeah, that'll be fine. The amount of times these will crash will be very rare. Okay, stable when not in combat, then hopefully it goes back to its rocky self as soon as it starts fighting. Okay, it didn't fire them because the enemy is not within its minimum is within its minimum distance, so firing would just be a waste of time, honestly. But this time, there we go. Going down slightly though, and I think I know why. That was due to me making it a bit more balanced. As you can see, it doesn't rock as much now. I think it actually looks somewhat pleasant to watch, at least in comparison to the drones. I could make it more stable, but after maybe 20 tests of this version versus a version which is completely stable, this one does dodge the odd cram cannon shot. Because of that motion going left and right, the enemy cram cannon assumes it's going to continue left or right, depending on its detection systems. And then it just misses. Now moving at 55 meters per second, and even more rocky on purpose during combat, I think it will be able to dodge some enemy fire. Not much, but some. Oh look, a sentinel! Really far away. Lathrix, did you add a shield? Yes, I did. The reason is we had a little bit of engine power left, and I don't want this going any faster than it already is, so we just have this. It's a bit silly looking, I admit. It's not going to help against cram cannon at all, but it should protect us from very low gauge armor penetration rounds, because all you need for those really fast, tiny shots is a strength 1 shield. This is strength 2.5, so it should be able to stop things like our turrets from killing this copter. And we will be seeing a lot of those when we move on to the white flyers and stuff like that, so adding some weak shields isn't really a bad idea. In fact, I would like to test this. Turn off for a second, buddy. Thank you. Let's spawn in one of our turrets, but angry. Now, I don't expect it to survive for a long time, but I just want to see if a few shots are indeed deflected. There we go. Stop. Okay, at least one shot's got through. A fair few being deflected, though. Actually, a lot being deflected. About half? Slightly over half? I think that's worth it. Well done, copter. 2 Desert Boa, which spawned in way too close to each other, and 3 Sidewinders versus 4 of the Copters. These lovely fellows massively have the volume and the resource count advantage. We have missiles. Begin. Whoa, that first Copter shield deflected so much then. Oh, cram cannon hit on the back there. They are using timed fuses, that's why they always seem to detonate. Okay, that just looks too cool not to pause. Just that. Two of them are getting way too close to each other. A direct cram cannon shot, unsurprisingly, did take it out. Now, in the actual campaign, I will make sure that they all have different settings. Right now, I just spawn them in far-ish away from each other. A narrow victory, I believe, for the Copters. No, actually, it's not quite over yet. Another direct cram cannon shot. Oh, that healing on the enemy is so brutal. However, a full volley is still so nasty from the copters. What? Oh, come on, the warhead timing delay is only on half a second. How did that not go off? Come on, shoot the darn thing before it heals up enough to fire. So we're now in the slowed down section. Once again knocking out the weapon. I think we're just slowly going to damage it until it eventually dies. And finally, the copter wins. And with that, I'm afraid I'm all out of time for today's video. I think overall, I am really happy with the copter. It seems to have so many flaws, but considering the cost and the amount of firepower it does have for that cost, it's certainly okay, and it's quite quick, and the shield is oddly effective. So with that, if you have enjoyed the video, then of course, likes, favourites, shares, comments, all that good stuff helps out me, helps out the channel, and most importantly, shows that From the Depths is a series you wish to see continued in the future. Now don't worry, the next video we will be straight back into the campaign. Thank you, and goodbye.